సార్ గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ సార్. అది సార్తో మాట్లాడున్నారు సార్. లింక్ షేర్ చేస్తున్నారు సార్ సార్కి. ఓకే సార్, ఓకే సార్, థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్. ఓకే సార్.
సార్ కుమార్ సార్, వెల్కమ్ సార్. హలో
Hello, morning Andy.
సార్.
Good evening. What should say?
గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ సార్. 5 minutes సార్.
Sure, take your time.
Hello. Sir, ఉన్నారు సార్? ఓకే సార్. ఓకే సార్, స్టార్ట్ చేస్తాం సార్. 23 మెంబర్స్ ఉన్నారు సార్, పర్లేదా? ఇంకొక సార్, కుమార్ సార్.
Yes, sir. I'm here.
సార్ గుడ్ ఈవినింగ్ సార్.
Good evening, Andy.
సార్, shall we start sir?
Sure.
Dear participants, it is our privilege to introduce Dr. Kumar Elamarthi, Associate Dean and Professor at the College of Engineering, Tennessee Technological University TTU, Mount Pleasant, Michigan, United States, as the resource person for today's FDP session. Dr. Elamarthi has over 15 years of research experience in embedded systems, mobile robotics, and integrated circuit design, with a focus on nanoscale IC design, CAD tool development, and low-cost telemetry systems. He has published more than 150 articles in peer-reviewed journals and conference proceedings, and has secured funding from various institutions. In addition to his research, Dr. Elamarthi has taught across all levels, developed new courses, and advised over 75 interdisciplinary capstone projects, many of which have won awards. He played a key role in developing the Bachelor of Science in Computer Engineering program at TTU and has led successful accreditation efforts. Dr. Elamarthi expertise includes embedded systems, low power wireless sensor networks, assistive devices, VLSI, and engineering education. We are excited to have him here today to share his valuable insights on cutting edge technology. Session is handed over to Kumar sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that very kind introduction. So let me see if I can share my screen here. Do you all see my screen? Can anybody confirm if you can see my screen?
Sir, yes, sir. Visual, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Visible. Wonderful. Okay, let's get started. Thank you for that very kind and generous introduction. Fortunately, I have been privileged to work with very smart people who make me look smart, but in reality, it's the team around me does all the work. So with that aside, I just want to talk a little bit today about my experiences in cybersecurity and my observations and the insights I have gathered in collaboration with my students and my colleagues. So this is what we're going to talk about, like cybersecurity. I don't think there is a single person in the meeting that have not heard about cybersecurity. It is a huge issue. So how huge of an issue is it? So this is what we're going to talk about briefly today. And before I go deep, I just wanted to say, let's try to keep it interactive. I do not want to keep it monotonous where I just talk from slide to slide, but try to be interactive so we can learn from each other. The whole point of the session is for us to learn, not just to listen, right? So learning happens through interactions. So let's try to do that. So coming back to cybersecurity, how big of an issue is it? Is it an issue at all? I mean, we're talking about it today, so it got to be an issue, right? So let me show you some stats just here. This stat, what we show here, is just the weekly number of cyber attacks per industry, average. By the way, I'm just talking about just the average weekly attacks happening per industry. And as you notice something, there is some unique trends here. Like, for example, we would think that education institutions don't have much to hide and we don't have much to lose and it should be okay. But if you notice something, the very top, the industry that is the most prone to cyber attacks, the most attacked industry is education institutions. So just let that sink in for a second. Education institutions are the most vulnerable to cyber attacks. That is one. And if you go down the list, government, military, understandable, they have a lot of government secrets, and the foreign governments are trying to hack in and try to get the information. That makes sense. Healthcare. Healthcare is also there. Why? So if you think about it, all our health records are on the online databases. So somebody could hack in there and misutilize that information and try to cause significant harm. Then if you go down the list, the big one I want you to focus on is utilities. Hello? So utilities is a big one. So why utilities? What are utilities? When we say utilities, we're talking about power. We're talking about all utilities such as power, electricity, you're talking about water, you're talking about gas lines and all that. When I say utilities, are we talking about just the delivery of power or maintenance of power? Are we talking about storage of power or transfer of power? Right? There is a lot of complexities. So what I want you to notice is one of the number here. look at the numbers in the parentheses. The utilities, what I'm trying to show here is the number of cyber attacks on utilities has went up by 40%, 47% compared to last year, right? The same thing, if you go down in communications, went up by 57% compared to last year. So we're talking about, if you go further down, if you look at the hardware vendors, hardware design, if you look at the transportation, vehicles and all, that is going up astronomically, like 70%. All of this is happening on devices that we're using nowadays. But let's back up for a second and see, like, we're moving forward in all these technologies, but what are these technologies? So what I have here is a few devices that we use almost every day. Some we use more, some we use less. But what is the common among these devices? Does anybody want to chime in? So we have a phone, we have a watch, we have a mirror, we have a car, and we have a bike. Are these the traditional systems, or are they something unique? Like nowadays, we call this a smartphone, we call this a smartwatch, we call this a smart vehicle, a smart mirror, a smart bike. But what does smart mean? Does smart mean cyber enabled? Or does smart mean being autonomous? What does it mean? Smart really not increase productivity. But productivity, why are we so focused on increasing productivity? Why are we so focused on pressing so fast? So what are the drivers behind it? Let's look into that briefly. So I don't know if you have seen this. I think this is quite common across the country, across the world right now. So what we have is, if you take the Earth's surface and if you divide that into urban area and rural areas, about 60% of the world's population is currently in urban areas. And as we move forward, what it is projected is, by 2050, this was a stat from about a year and a half ago, but now this number is going up. So what they're saying is, in the next few years, there is going to be huge migration happening into the urban areas with very few people located in the cities, rural areas. Take what is that going to bring? By Delhi, right, or Tirupati? Like, you're talking about this urban areas, and you might see, like, people are already migrating significantly in our urban areas. So what happens to the infrastructure? There is a lot of challenges. So let me put this in a different perspective. We have the Earth's surface. 70% of the world's population located in urban areas. In other words, is 2% of the Earth's surface. If 70% of the world's population is located in 2% of the Earth's surface, what challenges does it bring? Resources. Resources, energy is a big one. Power is a big one. So there is going to be a huge crisis that is happening forward, and we have to address these challenges. How do we address these challenges is what we're going to look into. So what are the challenges? If we use the traditional systems, the IC vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, and if we use the same vehicles, and the vehicles are not getting smaller, they're getting larger by the day. And people are also purchasing more than one vehicle at a time, too. And all these vehicles, if you take these electrical vehicles like a simple car, the average number of microsystems, microelectronic systems, or microprocessors, or small computers, whatever you want to call it, the average number of microprocessors in an average vehicle is about 40 right now, the minimum, on the low end, on the absolute low end. So if you go on a high-end vehicle, like if you take, for example, a Lexus or a BMW or a Mercedes and an E-Class, there is an average of 150 to 175 microcontrollers in each. So what happens to the safety? What if one doesn't work and it is connected to the grid? What happens if there is a problem? Safety is an issue for vehicles. Or how about the safety of the humans? We talked about all these people located in an urban area, and they are engaged in different sectors. Some of them are going to college, some of them are working in the hospital, some of them have to get utilities. There is safety issues, there is health issues. How are you going to have them move from one location to the other without causing increased pollution? How do you ensure safety of these people? How do you ensure you provide good infrastructure without causing a burden on the government? And how do you ensure they go from place A to place B, from home to work or to different locations without getting stuck in traffic, right? So there are many challenges associated with that. So how do we address that? The solution here is what we call, like we talked about, a smart ecosystem. Gone are the days where we can say is a utility company can work by itself, a healthcare company cannot work by itself, a higher education cannot work by itself. So now we have to be all connected. If we have to work in an environment where resources are finite, right, and also increase the work-life balance, and also ensure resources are available for future generations, we got to share resources. We got to share information. We got to share knowledge, and we have to work with each other. And smart ecosystem is an effective tool that can get us that way. So how do we do this? What are the smart ecosystem components? So when I say smart ecosystem, I'm not just talking about vehicles. I'm talking about infrastructure, the buildings, the roads, the flyovers that you have, the transportation systems you have, or the smart living utilities like the ones you're staying at home, or smart health. All the devices that you have on every day, like the watch you're wearing, can send all data, real-time data, to your healthcare provider, where the healthcare provider can constantly track this information and give you preventive suggestions, so that way you are healthy. Or maybe connect that to the government, send some of this data to the government so they can come up with custom healthcare plans that are much more efficient. Or how do you run a smart economy to ensure that the taxes are obtained on time and the services also provided on time? While we're doing all of this, one has to focus on, number one, privacy, data privacy, and number two, the most important, you got to focus on security. So this is all what we have to focus on. But can we talk about all of this today? Probably not, because in the limited time we have, this is a very complex system. So we're going to focus on just a couple of items. One, vehicles, and two, the grid that is used to power the entire ecosystem. So that is what we're talking about here. Smart ecosystem combines advanced power grid, smart grids, and electric vehicles. So I'm going to talk about just briefly what is a smart grid, what is electrical vehicles, and what do we need to do. The biggest point is we got to ensure sustainability. We got to ensure security, right? So in a vehicle while you're driving and steers you against the opposing traffic, what would happen? What if you have kids in your vehicle? What if you have babies in the vehicle? What if the person driving on the other side of the road is just learning how to drive? And there is a lot of challenges associated with that. So how do we address this? So let's look into here. Smart grids. So let's talk about smart grids for a second. Here on the right side of my slide, I have two images. The one in purple talks about the electrical power grid in its traditional form, and the one in the green is the grid of tomorrow, that is a smart grid. So what are the components here? So the one on the left, what you might see is very few power plants. We have the coal power plant, we have the hydro power plant, and a couple of nuclear power plants. So what they do is they generate the power and they send it all from different locations to a centralized location. And based upon the power that we get, we distribute it directly from the power to centralized location to homes. That is a traditional way. That is what was done yesterday. But if you see these power plants, like you can, based upon the demand that you have, you can continuously optimize for generating more or less based on the demand. If somebody needs more power in the daytime, you can increase the often if they need less, you could throttle it down. You can generate less power, right? So you can automatically, not automatically, based upon real-time data, you can generate more or you can generate less. That is yesterday. Now tomorrow, or you can say today, the number of power plants have increased substantially. The types of power plants have increased substantially. So yes, we still have nuclear, we still have hydro, but the coal power plants are going down. So yes, nuclear, you can control the energy generated, and same with hydro to some extent. But the new ones, we're talking about the wind farms. Wind, we generate energy, but is it in our hands? We cannot control how much energy we produce at all. The same way, solar. We know a little bit of when we will generate more and less, but we cannot control how much energy we generate. And we all know the amount of energy we generate from these power plants is not small enough to be stored on miniature batteries. There is huge battery banks that are coming up, but we have to think about how do we store this energy. I mean, if the supply of the energy is much higher than the demand of the energy at a certain time, you got to think about how do you distribute that energy, right? It's not just centralized in one location. The power plants are located in so many different locations, and we got to think about how do we manage this power? How do we distribute the power? And as I said, if you generate more power than necessary, you got to store it somewhere, the battery banks. Now, on the other side, in the past, the power was flowing only in one direction, from the power plant to the homes. But these days, people are also putting power on small power banks, or we can say solar panels. People are putting small wind farms in their backyards. So some of the power, they could use it, but some of it is sent back, right? So, and the power is flowing both ways. But what if the grid is at maximum capacity already and the end user is trying to send the power back? How is it going to work on the grid, right? So there is the power modality and the power distribution network the power generation, storage, and distribution network has changed profoundly, and it is going to change furthermore in the next few years. So where does cyber come into place, right? So we're talking about energy systems. Like, for example, I'm talking about storing the energy. You've got to have electronic systems to store the energy. And we know electricity is just a signal. So you can have Ethernet over electricity. Through Ethernet over electricity, you can go and control the power banks and cause detrimental harm on them. That is a possibility. So that is one way. Or you can go from a single user. Like, if your power network is designed in such a way that you can deliver power to the network from your home, you have a direct connection to the smart grid. You can easily access all the communication channels, and you can go into the power grid and cause a major disruption and even cause a physical damage to the infrastructure. So think about this for a second. You're in a hospital, your parents are in a hospital, and they're doing a telescopic surgery. And this is done by an individual, by a robot in the hospital, but the doctor is about several hundred miles away. And there is a major disruption in power. The entire power grid is lost, and there is no power to conduct the robotic surgery. What happens to the life of the human? That is a major problem. So we got to ensure the grid is not compromised. Okay. Now, here is some of the attacks I want to show you. The smart grids attacks can be as simple as data manipulation. Yes, it is not detrimental. It could be attacking the systems to steal a lot of data. That itself is bad, but to shut down a complete system, it is certainly possible. Okay, there could be different types of attacks. False data injection, persistent threats, right? So there is all kinds of attacks happening, causing not only power outages, causing economic losses and damages to physical infrastructure. And one cannot have that. So in the next slide, I'm going to show you, here are just a few examples of attacks on smart grids. So false data injection, like all it talks about is creating a congestion on the transmission lines. You load the data, extensive data on the transmission lines, and you overload it and the power is not transmitted, right? Or you inject false data and route the power elsewhere from one location to the other and compromising the service you provide. Or, for example, man-in-the-middle attack. So supervised control and data acquisition system. So if there is a data acquisition system, if you can control it, you can change the power delivered from one location to the other. And you can even stop the power, right? And you can steal the data on where the power is transmitted, and potentially, let's say hypothetically, there is a power being generated and also a significant amount of power used in some sector in the country, and there is a top secret facility. And the opposing country steals this data. They could use this information for creating a cyber attacks on your secret facility. That is a problem. There is a huge kind of attacks here. So one has to keep in mind about all these attacks when it comes to smart grids. Okay. Now, where do EVs come into place? So electrical vehicles are a buzzword these days, and everybody's trying to get into electrical vehicles. Why? Is it because it is low cost? Is it because energy is sustainable? Is it because it is a cool factor? Why? I'll talk about why in a second. But now the point is, no matter what the
Excuse me,
reasons
sir.
are.
Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, we are able to see only your first slide. The slides are not moving.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh my
actually,
God.
what we thought is you
Oh
are
my God.
explaining.
No, I'm moving on. Like I'm already 15 slides in. Oh my God.
We are just
Okay, let me see
hearing your
something.
explanation but unable to see the movement in the slides.
Oh, 1 second. Huh. Okay, let me try one other thing here. Now, can you see this better, man?
Yes, sir.
So you're able to see all these now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Movement.
Yes, sir,
Movement. Yes,
it's
sir.
moving now, but you just please go for slideshow.
That's what I did before.
But it's not moving.
Okay, let's do it this way. Yeah, for some reason, I don't know why, but let's do it this way. I mean, as long as you can see the slides here, I will go slide by slide and we can talk. So let me try the slideshow once and see how it works. Can you see my slide now?
Yes, sir, that particular slide is visible,
But
but
it is not
not as a
moving.
slideshow. But not as a slideshow.
I'm doing it as a slideshow, but okay. Let's stay with this one because I'm trying to present as a slideshow and it is not going through. So I will share my window and you can see the slides hopefully this way. You're able to see the slides, right? I mean, hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, now it's moving, sir.
Okay, let's go with this. Let's go with this. I mean, I'm trying to maximize the screen whatever I can. Oh, no. Yeah, let's go with this. And I will try to see the two screens at the same time to ensure you're seeing this. Okay. So, okay. So the point I'm trying to say, okay, let me go back here quickly. Here is a few examples of the smart grid I was talking about. The picture on the left, on the purple, is the grid of yesterday, and the one on the right, the green, is the smart grid that is working today and tomorrow. And here are the taxonomy of the different types of attacks, cyber attacks on the smart grid, is what I was trying to talk about. Now, so coming back to electrical vehicles, so we're talking about EVs are the new buzzword and the new way of transportation. And now it creates a opportunity the energy utilized in an electrical vehicle for transportation far exceeds the capability and the capacity of the grids nowadays. And also, the grids, if you think about it, the grids are all static. They go for, yeah, the power is being distributed, but the grids are located in finite areas. But when you're talking about electrical vehicles, you power them up and you are mobile. And power's necessity is also changing. So one could start driving from an urban area, going to a rural area, and you need to charge your vehicle there again to come back, which means you need high power in the rural areas. So that is causing a shift in the demand of the power. So let me talk about this here briefly. Here I have two slides. I just want to show you quickly. Is the one on the left talks about the market share of electrical vehicles in each country, right? So now if you see overall, about roughly across all the countries, right? Across all the countries right now, there is already 40 million EVs in operation right now. And what I want you to just look into it is like, it is growing exponentially, number one. Number two, the difference or the growth between 22 and 23 is just astronomically 35%. And that is increasing by the day. That number is increasing by the day, 35%. And if we grow again by 35% from 40 million, that is going to be 60 million. And if the growth continues, which it is projected to continue, it is going to be a significant challenge for engineers. But now, the graph on the right is what I want to show you. It's not all great. It is good, but not great. What I want to show you here is this is the greenhouse gas emissions from electrical vehicles compared to IC vehicles, internal combustion vehicles. So EV vehicles, yeah, we might say it is not emitting any gases, right? But where is the energy generated, right? There is some emissions there. The batteries that are utilized here, the lithium batteries, to manufacture those batteries, there is a lot of emissions happening as well. So electrical vehicles are not emission-free completely. There is some emissions, but as you see, 15 versus 22. There is almost a 50% difference of emissions between IC vehicles and electrical vehicles. So that this significant advantage is propelling and catalyzing the growth in EVs as well, is what I want to talk about. Now, what is happening? Here is something else also happening. There are key elements influencing global adoption. One, economical viability. The cost of EVs is coming down substantially. Governments are subsidizing it even more, right? But the flip side, the charging infrastructure, it is still lacking. So if I tell you, if you take an electrical vehicle and if you charge it at your home, and it would take on your regular power outlet, if I tell you if you plug it in, and if it takes about 14 hours overnight to charge for 100 miles, will it suffice? Maybe, maybe not. For a lot of people, it does not. So you need to have a high power delivery charging infrastructure. That's not there yet. That is a problem. So we need to think about how do you set up this charging infrastructure, right? And also policies. The government has to come in and set up different procedures. So how do you balance that? There are different aspects. So coming here, I'm going to move a little forward quickly because I know we have only a little time. So if you do this, if you balance the smart grid and also the vehicles and also the infrastructure, also the governance, all of this, right? So think about this for a second. If I do this, what it says is I can save up to 300 lives each year in a city of 5 million. So in a place like, let's say, for example, a city like Chennai, going towards an ecosystem, a smart ecosystem, I can save 300 people from dying. That is a substantial increase. I mean, even if you save one life, that is something. But saving 300 people, that is something else. Now, you're decreasing the crime rate by 40%, right? Crime rate going down by 40%, increasing the living style, the livability of humans. So like that, there are many, many advantages when you do the smart ecosystem. So let's come back into the EV integration. So what are the challenges? So when you talk about the smart vehicles, there is the grid, there is the charging station, there is the vehicle, and this grid is dynamic in different locations. So there could be attacks targeting just the charging stations. So now think about it. What kind of an attack would it be? Let's say the charging station right now, the high power charging station, let's say is charging at 250 kilowatts per hour. Okay, and we know if everybody wants their vehicles to be charged very quickly, and they don't want to wait. So to address that, the power being delivered initially is at a very high speed, right? A very high amperage. You deliver high power and a high amperage, it charges the battery. And the way these systems are designed is that once the batteries are charged to a certain percentage, the amperage that is going through is throttled down to ensure safety. But if somebody gets into this charging stations and removes the throttle of reducing the amperage, and if you keep going at 250 kilowatts continuously, what could happen to the batteries? Once it crosses a certain capacity, it doesn't stop, the batteries could explode. Those are very harmful. And batteries, I don't know if anybody has seen a place where batteries have exploded. So, but battery explosion is serious. It's very serious. It's very harmful. So somebody could easily attack a charging station, right? Or one could go into the charging station, access all the data from a vehicle, and utilize the data for some other purposes. Or somebody could go into a vehicle. From the vehicle, they could access the grid, and from the grid, they could control the different operations of the grid. Or some could go into the grid and deny the service of electric power delivery to vehicles such as ambulances or different locations. There could be different challenges. So how do we do this? How do we manage this? So we need to provide a framework to address these challenges. So the NIST provides a framework to manage the cybersecurity. So what it says is, first you got to identify. You got to come up with different core functions. You got to identify what are the different threats potential. What are the different attacks that is potential. Then you got to come up with a way to protect your system from all these threats, right? Once you put that in place, you got to identify, you got to come up with mechanisms to detect these threats very quickly. Yes, sir. Somebody raised their hand. Okay. Probably it might be an accident of sorts. Okay. So the point is, you got to come up with a framework that you can detect the threats, you can protect it, and you can respond. And sometimes the response is like probably cutting off the grid from the problem. But how do you recover? I mean, sometimes response and recovery takes months of time, which you cannot have some certain times. You got to come up with mechanisms to recover quickly. So, okay, detection methods. I mean, there are many detection methods in cyber attacks, but the point is, these attacks, as I showed you earlier in the first few slides. Oh, I don't think you have seen that. Here is the slide I showed earlier. This talks about the average cyber attacks per week per industry. So as you see, the percentages talks about the percentage increase from year to year. The number of attacks is increasing, and the percentage of attacks is increasing in each industry, right? So, we'll talk about this for a second. So, when the types of attacks are increasing, one cannot look at the data and say, yes, that is an attack. To identify new attacks, new anomalies have to be detected, and people are using machine learning, deep learning models to detect all these, right? So machine learning models are significantly helpful here, and some of them use statistical analysis, some of them use artificial intelligence, some of them use combinations. So, but as we know, the machine learning models are only as good as the information we feed them. This requires one to constantly provide new updates, new data to our machine learning models to detect patterns. Okay. Now, here is an example I showed you. I just want to talk about this briefly for a second. Machine learning models. This is something we see all the time with our researchers here. Choosing the right estimator is critical in machine learning models. If you do not choose the right estimator, you could classify it completely wrong, because if you train it wrong, the information, the inferences that you get is also going to be wrong. So to train rightly, you got to have the right estimator. So here is an example, and here is a link I have. It's a scikit-learn. It's a great example that talks about how to choose the right estimator for different applications. And I strongly encourage you all to try this out when you get a chance. Now, in addition to the learning models, you got to select the right features. Okay. And you got to ensure the right features are selected in order to detect the intrusion detections, right? And you also have to come up with ways to detect the attack, stop the attack, and recover from the attack very quickly. So if you select the right features correctly, you can quickly identify the false data injections and grid manipulations and prevent them. But if you do not do so, that is going to be a problem. So again, there is different mitigation methodologies. The simplest and the straightforward one is do not put the raw data on the grid. Encrypt the data, and ensure secure communication protocols are used continuously. In every communication, by the way, electrical vehicles, the CAN bus that is used in vehicles internally, unfortunately, is one of the most unsecure systems. And encryption and security is lacking in the CAN bus. So there is a lot of work necessary to secure the CAN bus and the data going into the electrical vehicles, right? That is something we got to keep in mind. And also, the next thing is network segmentation. Do we need to be connected to the network all the time? Or can we be isolated from the network at times? That is something you got to look into. So if you need the data to be transmitted from the network to your end station, great, connect it. But if you do not need it, think about ways to isolate it from the primary network, right? Other aspect is how do you build a resilient network? Okay, so a lot of times, if you detect an attack, it requires a human intervention. And human intervention at times takes a lot of time. But can you design a system? Can you design a control system in such a way that it detects the attack, detects the fault, and self-corrects without waiting for human intervention? That is something. Again, that is a fine line you've got to figure out. Lastly, as I said earlier, you got to train the system with new data regularly to ensure the system is able to detect any known attacks that is happening. Okay. So there are standards. The nice thing is there are standards for it. You can follow. There is industry frameworks, IUC 62, 351 for power systems. The NIST comes up with different numerous standards for that. Okay, so utilize the standards, industry standards out there. Now, I just want to talk about quickly a few examples. Here is a few examples, by the way, guys. This just a few examples of data that happened, attacks that happened. These I just took a handful of them from one literature. So if you see, these are all happened in the past 2 years. And you might look at the data, the first one, 2023. If you see, it's targeted multiple sectors, including defense, healthcare, and energy. And you might talk about extracting only 100 megabytes of data. But if you look into the core data, 100 megabytes is a lot of data. And you're talking about a continuous spying campaign. Okay. How harmful is it? That is something you got to think about it. Okay. So, for example, let me take the 2022 cyber attack. Disrupted all terminal operations in Europe. Okay. It sabotaged energy companies' payment portals and hindered transportation of oil to different countries. What detrimental harm would it cause to the economy? What harm would it cause to the community? That is a big issue. So the issues that are going to come up on the cyber attacks to the grid goes far beyond just the power. There is a lot of challenges with that. So keep that in mind. Now, this is I'm just going to wrap this up quickly soon. So we're talking about integrating EVs. So if you integrate EVs with the grid, so this is something a unique advantage. It provides a unique advantage. Because if you remember, we talked about it briefly. In the smart grid, you transmit power from the power plants all the way to the end user. But what if the end user, which is the electrical vehicles with huge batteries, also serve as mobile charge ports, mobile energy storage systems, right? So if you're connected to the grid, what if you deliver power to the vehicles and the power is being delivered during off-peak times? And if you transmit the power and store all the power in the vehicles and not worry about the demand on the grid, that would be helpful. That balance the load, right? So that is going to be helpful. But how do you ensure the right algorithms are in place? How do you ensure sufficient security measures are in place to operate efficiently? That is going to be a big challenge up front. Again, as I said, you got to use the right protocols, and two, you got to ensure the data is captured in real time and adjust the charging network accordingly. So there are other mechanisms to secure the system, which is blockchain is one. And blockchain can be used to ensure secure transactions, while at the same time, it can ensure that to a certain extent, the system is isolated from the major network. It can work in a decentralized manner. It can ensure that automation is provided of sorts, and it can ensure safety and privacy of EV transactions, which is a big aspect, right? Now, we got to think about self-healing mechanisms, as I was talking about earlier. You cannot just no longer say human intervention is necessary. You got to think about how can the system detect faults, isolate problems, and restore operations very quickly without causing major disruption. So, what are the trends going on in this area? One is AI ML-driven data analytics. Okay. And number two, security frameworks at different levels, anywhere from the edge device all the way to the cloud. There are multi-layered security frameworks, right? Then ensure that enhancing the capabilities of the grids. And lastly, also looking at quantum computing to ensure see if we can provide a secure protocols. So lastly, most importantly, we got to bring in the government and regulatory commissions to ensure that the right policies and procedures are in place. But at the same time, the government is better informed so they can take actions that support the public but doesn't cause harm to the public is something we got to look into. So these are a few examples of cities that we're talking about here. Singapore is a smart city already. It collects data through the network, through the grid, through the vehicles to reduce the congestion. Okay. Here is New York. Here is a big city that we know. You might chuckle at that, what they're using it for, but by simply looking at the trash that is generated by public in the vicinity, they're able to figure out optimal routes for their electrical vehicles and feed that information to the system, and that allow quicker commutes, okay, and better utilization of resources, less pollution, cleaner environment, and also reduced fraud. They're like that. There are many applications. If you ensure a safe grid and safe vehicle network, you can generate a smart city and collectively can increase the quality of life of a human. As I said, if you connect to the smart ecosystem, you can save up to 300 lives per person, per city of 5 million per year. Even saving one life is worth the effort that we all put in. So with that, I will stop and see if you all have any questions. Hello, Dr. Vijay Kumar, you say raise your hand. Hello?
Just a minute, star will come, sir.
Okay.
Hello. Okay. Okay. మీరు తినండి కొద్దిసేపు.
Anna, 1, 2, 0 now. 1, 2.
హలో సార్ సార్ సెషన్లో మిమ్మల్ని అడిగారు సార్ సార్ ఒకసారి ఏమైనా మాట్లాడతారా సార్?
1, 2.
ఓకే సార్ ఒకసారి మాట్లాడతారు. కొద్దిసేపు ఉండు. Any questions from audience? Any questions? shall we conclude, sir?
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for your kind attention. And I want to share, like, lastly, this is my contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions or engage in any follow-up conversation that anybody like to have. Again, lastly, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all this evening.
One minute. On behalf of Department of Electrical and Electronics Engineering, SV Colleges of Engineering, Engineering and Technology, I extend our sincere thanks to Dr. Kumar Elamarthi for his insightful session on cybersecurity in smart grids and EV networks. Dr. Elamarthi's deep expertise has provided us with invaluable knowledge on the critical challenges and solutions in securing smart grids and EV networks. His session was both informative and thought-provoking, highlighting the importance of cybersecurity in shaping the future of energy and transportation. We truly appreciate the time and effort Dr. Elamarthi invested in this session, and we are confident that his insights will have a lasting impact. Thank you once again, Dr. Elamarthi, for sharing your expertise with us today. We look forward to more opportunities to learn from you in the future. Sir, thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. Good day. Bye.
Hello. అయిపోయింది మేడం చేసేసాను